Welcome to the Dom Sub Devotion Podcast. Every episode of Dom Sub Devotion is an authentic reflection of our real life in a loving 24/7 DS marriage. If you crave the passion and intensity of a power exchange dynamic inside of a deeply loving and intimate relationship, you've found the right place. You can always find more from us in the show notes and at infinitedevotion.com. Thank you for listening.
So I told you today that for our podcast, I just wanted us to sit down together and have a conversation about a few different things just between you and me. And to almost forget that we're recording it, to just let it be a conversation between you and I. And then I was sitting down here looking at the lights and the cameras and the microphones and the cables. It's a little hard to forget that we're recording sometimes when we sit down and do these.
Yeah, I would agree with that, at least to some degree. Yeah, it's different than sitting down on the couch with a cup of coffee after breakfast.
Exactly, because that's where some of our deepest conversations over the last several years have been.
Either over breakfast or after. The tears come both times.
So much of the depth in our conversations just come spontaneously. And there are so many times where I think, man, I wish we were sitting down recording that to share it with people because it would be so valuable.
While I'm in my bathrobe.
And that's the thing, we can't, it takes so much to put this all together, especially to record for video. If we were just recording for audio, we
Oh,
could
yeah.
easily sit down in a bathrobe and not have to do all of everything that goes into putting this whole thing together.
Yeah, I think the lighting is the hardest part.
So anyway, I brought a few topics just for us to discuss and talk about. The first one of them is something that I have said to people we've worked with in the past about making your dynamic work in your life. And that statement is that we make it so that life is the dynamic, the relationship is the dynamic, and the dynamic is the relationship. We don't try to create like this separate thing on top of the relationship that adds more layers and levels of performance. But instead we incorporate these dynamics into the relationship. And that's something I think we've done really well together over the 5.5 years.
I completely agree because I know that no matter what it is, I can ask you, I can come to you for your leadership and I can trust it. Now, actually trusting it has been, the work I had to do. So I'm not living in an internal dialogue.
Say a little bit more about that when you say actually trusting it.
Well, at the beginning of this, we've shared before that you were the one who brought this to me. And I didn't know what this is. I'd never heard of it. I'd never read about it outside of 50 Shades, but we all know that that's just a small glimpse. I don't even know what you'd call that, into what this truly can be. So when I said yes to you, that wasn't intuitive knowing. I wouldn't have said that at the time, maybe, but it was because it felt right to me deeply. And I knew that I got to a point where I was asking a lot of questions, but I got to a point where I had to realize I don't get to actually know what this all truly can be because none of us know what's coming in life. So when I said yes, I would follow you, but my work has had to be undoing that constant questioning in my mind that I didn't even realize was there. This is what partly showed me how deep in these patterns I've been living. And wow, I've said this many times, but the way I get to live every day is, I don't know how many times different, better, more peaceful, relaxed, surrendered.
Do you remember some of the questions that you asked me back in
Um,
the, for those who are newer here or haven't listened to the, almost 50 episodes of this we have out now, when I asked Dawn to be my submissive and her answer was, huh? What does that mean? We embarked on a month worth of lots of really deep conversations about what this meant and what I was asking of her and how this was going to go before she finally agreed, before you finally agreed and said yes. Do you remember some of the questions you asked me, or the curiosities or the uncertainties you had?
well, the biggest one I remember is I didn't want to become a doormat and lose myself. That's mainly where everything was stemming from. And you reassured me that that wouldn't happen. And I was like, okay.
Back to this whole the life, the relationship is the dynamic and the dynamic is the relationship. What that's done just in that one concern, that big one about becoming a doormat, about losing yourself, was that through you letting go and following me, what I was then able to help to show you is that you'd been the one treating yourself like a doormat for your whole life. And my desire was to lead you out of that, not deeper into it, or not into being a different kind of doormat, but to actually have you rise and to allow you to fall in love with yourself in the way that I loved you.
Oh man, this is hard to talk about without crying. I feel like I've just gotten to the point of realizing uh, how much I didn't even know who I was, how all of my life was self-abandonment. And now, like, I feel like I've gotten to the root of my belief systems that were perpetuating the patterns of my life, down to why I became a mom at 19 years old. Well, technically 18. I mean, I got pregnant at 18. And uncovering those deeper belief systems that have also impacted my relationship with you, like feeling unwanted, like I don't matter. That is the very like root of self-abandonment right there. And so, to some degree, when I said yes to being your submissive, I was still living in self-abandonment. Not not in the same way, because our relationship I felt was very unique and special to me. And I felt the way that you had always cared for me and always wanted what was best for me. There was no question ever in that. But wow, like I'm still undoing the pain of the depth of how I didn't know who I was.
And it just kind of struck me as you were saying this, a different way of putting some of this is we talk all the time about consent in dominant submissive relationships. And
Yeah.
most of the time, that conversation goes the submissive has to consent to what the dominant wants. But in this case, even though our relationship was different and you didn't doormat yourself to the same level that you did in lots of other places in your life with me,
Yeah.
you probably would have if I would have been trying to or acting in a way that would have allowed that.
Yeah, consciously or unconsciously.
Right. Because that had been, was, and to some extent still has been up until very recently your pattern of doing that almost automatically without realizing it.
Absolutely. Because if the of my belief systems was I don't matter, I'm unwanted, like, how can I show up differently?
So what kind of struck me is that there was still a piece of you that was operating out of that belief system in relation to me. And therefore, like, I never consented to having you relate to me in that way or to put yourself as a doormat underneath me. That's never what I wanted from you.
Is that where I need to apologize? I'm sorry.
Yes, I think an apology is warranted. It's more like this is the reason why I've been so persistent about leading you to a place of wholeness in yourself and fullness in yourself, because I want to relate to a whole, full version of you, not to a version of you that is acting like you don't matter and therefore not even receiving all of the love that I have to give you.
It's been an ongoing unwinding of that.
So we're always going somewhere in life, right? We're either moving forward or we're standing still. And if we're standing still, we're going backwards because life keeps happening around us. And this is why, kind of back to where I started this, the relationship and the dynamic can't be separate. They have to be, if we're doing this in a loving, in a marriage, in a long-term relationship, we have to integrate all of this stuff. Because in order for you to submit to me in a way that feels authentic to you, that feels authentic to me, receiving it from you, it's just got to be real. And it can't be real if we're just trying to act out a kink scene all the time.
Right. And back to kind of what I shared earlier, that I know that I can come to you for any part of my life and ask for your leadership. And if I wasn't able to do that, if there were pieces where it's like, oh, well, I'm left to myself, man, I don't like, obviously, for a while, it's not like we jumped in and I stopped making a decision. But no matter what, you were always willing to and wanted to. It was more of, where could I let go? And so that's been the process for me, is looking at those places where, for one, I was overthinking, or I felt paralyzed, or I recognized I'm working under the disguise of what is the perfect answer here. Like, some of those questions I'd ask myself, and frankly, it was impacting my whole life. I just couldn't see it all at one time. And so I started with what I could see. We started with what you could see in me. And that's where you brought those areas. And of course, I wasn't going to argue with any of it because, yeah, it just felt real and true. But at the beginning, I wasn't even connected to the depth of my feels, to the depth of what my true experience was, which is why I couldn't even see for myself how all I was trying to do was, for one, be wanted, feel loved, be perfect, all those things in every area of my life.
And what's happened slowly but intentionally over time is, as we've seen together, or you have or I have, and then brought it to each other, places where something's happening separately inside of you or separately inside of me that hasn't been incorporated into this relationship, into this dynamic, into the full polarity of union and of our dominant submissive dynamic and what that means to us. We bring those things and we lay them out on the table, and sometimes we're not ready to deal with them yet.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it becomes obvious that we need to.
And then that only starts the unwinding process. That can last a very long time.
Yeah. Because there are certain elements of this. We've gone into them before. We don't need to go into the weeds with that today, but there are certain areas of this relationship that we've been trying to sort out how to incorporate them, how I can lead well, how you can let go for years. And we've had to be patient with each other, with ourselves, as we've sorted out how to make that work. But what's happened consistently every single time with every single thing, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that when we do and when we get it, when we nail it, meaning it feels right, it's working right, it just goes smoothly, where I can effortlessly lead you and you can effortlessly follow me.
Absolutely. Like, I just found myself thinking, like, it's hard to even remember what some of life was like, even a year, 2, 3 years ago, because it is a very effortless process. Now, in full transparency, I feel like the last month of my life has been probably the hardest, one of them, in just what I've seen inside of myself.
Yeah, there'll come a time when we can go a little bit deeper into that.
Oh, I'm not ready. I'm just in the middle of all of that.
But it's been a rockier month than we've had in a while. Not, well, I guess some ways even between you and I, not so much that there's challenges that threaten any part of our relationship, but when one of us is feeling big upheaval, the other feels it too. And sometimes we pass that back and forth. We've done some of that in the last month where you've gone through some big stuff and then it hits me sideways because now something's different in you. And yeah, there are lots of waves in the ocean sometimes.
Yeah, it's almost like a couple different analogies come to my mind. I'm going to share the second one because it's funnier.
My
It's like,
favorite part is when you laugh at your own jokes
yeah, I know.
before you've told them.
Well, just wait. It's like I'm a Mr. Potato Head and I got thrown upside down and like all my parts fell out and now I have to be put back together. I mean, that's what it kind of feels like. It's just like boom. And it's like, oh my gosh, like who am I? I I'm not even sure. Like, and then that just impacts every single relationship of my life. And so it's been disorienting, I guess is a good word for it.
My only question is, why are you Mr. Potato Head and not Mrs. Potato
Oh, I
Head?
should be Mrs. But like the in my childhood experience, Mr. Potato Head was kind of the thing. I don't even know if I ever
They
came across a Mrs.
they came out with
So
Mrs. Potato Head to sell more potato heads.
yeah, I'm sure, but I don't know. That's just what came to my mind. The other one was a puzzle, like destroying a puzzle, throwing all the pieces up in the air and having to put it back together. So,
This all kind of leads to another one of the topics I wanted to talk to you about today. And that's this reality or this truth that as we evolve as people, as we evolve as individuals and grow, if we're really focused on making everything as good as it can be in our lives, in individually and together, we're always going to be growing and evolving. And as we grow and evolve as individuals, the dominant submissive dynamic has to evolve with us. It can't be this rigid thing that's expecting everything to be the same.
no, it can't be at all.
And a part of the challenge in leading a dynamic that's flexible and that evolves is that sometimes everything that worked yesterday doesn't work anymore today. And it can feel almost as though I'm not in control. Like if you're the one who's growing and evolving very quickly, it can leave it seeming like your evolution, your growth is actually what's in control of the dynamic.
Okay, so we've been through that a few times. So tell me what that's been like for you.
Well, you said the word disorienting. It's definitely that because in the way that I try to lead you, I try to set a very firm and direct course for our lives based on what I see as being right and true about myself, about you, and about what we can be together. And I can be operating under what feels like a very certain framework inside of myself about how to move us in the direction that I see being right for us. And then as your Mrs. Potato Head goes up in the air and all your parts come flying out, I'm just going to use your analogy. The same things that I may have had us doing yesterday to move us in the direction of what I see as best for us might be completely unrealistic or unattainable or just a flat out bad idea given the emotional state that you're in, which makes it a constant challenge to try to sort out in the moment where are we now. And sometimes, often, it means, like we talked about on a recent episode, just slowing down and not being concerned with trying to get somewhere or to try to keep moving towards an objective, which is my responsibility to move us towards an objective. But to know when the time is to just take a deep breath, pause, and be where we are.
Yeah, the word that's coming up for me is integration. Like
Yeah.
when I have gone through some pretty big letting goes, seeing patterns, belief systems, And now I have to feel into how do I operate in the world without that anymore. It feels really disorienting. And so time and time again, we get to the point where it does impact our relationship. And so I want you to expand a little bit more on this. It can almost feel like we are stalling,
Yeah.
if that's the perspective you take, but it's not a stall. It's a be where your feet are and allow yourself to adjust. And so one thing I remember more recently said to you is like, you don't get to control my timeline of letting go. And
But I
so,
want to.
right. And so tell me more about from your perspective, like maybe in the past and how you've come into more of who you are today of in those moments where you're like, oh shit, this isn't working anymore. Now I need to figure something else out. And you already said it, you have to have a lot of patience with yourself, but you also have to trust yourself. And like, tell me more about what that experience has been for you.
Patience with myself is important, but patience with you is everything. Because if I'm impatient with you in any way, which can be a moment to moment thing, right? We had something happen within the last couple of weeks here where I was still discussing something about where I wanted to go, and you had kind of shifted into a moment where you really needed to be where you were. And I missed that little moment, that little shift, and it it went really, really badly for both of us for a little while. Like it was a big challenge. Be- just that one little moment of kind of missing that you were already in that kind of activated place where you just needed to be held and not be led.
Yeah. And I said that. I essentially said, I'm feeling this right now.
So I have to be patient with you. And a big thing for me has been realizing that I can slow down and just pause and be with whatever's going on here. And that doesn't mean that I have to let go of or give up on the direction that I'm taking us. That's something that would happen internally for me in the past was if you had kind of a resistance to wherever it was that I was leading you, I would just feel like I needed to drop the whole thing. And not necessarily give up, but kind of give up, which was
But
my own pattern of, yeah, all sorts of the unworthiness and things that I've had to work through. Like one little bit of resistance from you, and I would just be like, oh, fuck it. Now it's much easier for me to say, okay, we're in a holding pattern right now. Let's slow down and pay attention to what's going on because I still believe in everything that I have been standing for here fully and wholeheartedly, but there's something that I need to see so that I can keep on leading you and us in that direction. And that's just patience, and it's absolute torture sometimes.
it is because I know that you can see some of the deeper things that have been in me. I know that. And you could point all of them out to me, but pointing them out to me doesn't unwind them in my system. It doesn't help me feel what I need to feel in order to fully let go. I don't even know what that all is, and you can't know that either. And that's why I say, like, you don't get to control my timeline. I don't get to control my timeline because I can want the same thing of where you want to lead us, but we are both in a surrender to living in the moment. And it really, when we're in like that, I'm going to call it that ecstasy together, like that's where I feel like it just opens both of us up more.
Yeah, and the only way that we are there is to be, I've heard it said this way, that we are both masterpieces and works in progress at the same time.
Yeah.
And we have to be fully and completely in acceptance of the fact that we are already masterpieces to be in that ecstasy together. But those moments they're always fleeting, because where this part of the conversation started was evolution, right? We're always
Mm.
evolving, we're always changing, we're always seeing more if we want to and we're open to it. We are always evolving as individuals, as people, in our humanness. And when we touch those really beautiful moments of what feels like heaven on earth together, it isn't going to stay there, because as soon as we've touched that and seen it and felt it, it's going to teach us something about ourselves. It's going to show us something about ourselves, and we're right off evolving again.
It's a wild ride. And I've said this before. I don't like roller coasters.
But I do think that it becomes more and more available and possible to stay closer to that place where we are feeling ourselves and each other as the spiritual perfection that we already are as individuals. When we accept the evolution, when we don't resist it, when we trust it, and when we stay engaged in relating to ourselves and each other and the world beyond us in the way that allows energy to move and flow freely without resistance, then the work in progress part of us doesn't have to take us so far away from the masterpiece part of us. We don't have to go on these long roller coaster journeys to come back, but we can stay relatively close to both at the same time.
It's like riding the waves together.
Yeah, and this is where we like to say that we're not separate, because the ocean doesn't know that it has waves. It's just the ocean. The waves aren't separate parts of the ocean, they're just different expressions of it. And this is what we've continued to find and feel and experience together, is the way that something moves in me and it moves something in you. Something moves in you, it moves something in me. We're so deeply and intimately connected that things that don't make sense happen in relation to each other and the world beyond us spontaneously, in ways that maybe we just didn't notice before. But it's a really fascinating thing to feel almost the fabric of reality bending to your openness and your receptivity.
I better not fuck it up, huh?
Yes, now you need to be perfect so you don't make any mistakes and screw this up for us.
Oh my gosh. The ego wants to tell me that
All
for
right. And
sure.
that's a part of the judgment, right?
Mhm.
That's a part of the thing that sees work in progress as flawed, broken, and like imperfect.
Yeah. I definitely have been worked over with those words and come to a different level of acceptance, which is still a work in progress.
That's what I think is really coming for us and evolving for us almost in real time right now, is for you that acceptance of the fact that you are always a work in progress, and that's okay, and it's necessary, and it's important, and that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you.
Yeah. I have a lot I could say down on that, but that kind of takes us down another rabbit hole.
So as we evolve again, this dynamic has to evolve. And it's probably the biggest challenge in leading this kind of a dominant submissive dynamic. The way that we do this and the way that we teach it, probably the hardest thing is if I'm leading you to deeper embodiment, deeper authenticity, and everything that it takes to come into that, you're going to be a different person every month. And I can't just adhere to a set of rules and rituals and structure because I set it up a year and a half ago, and I can't expect it still to work now.
So, what you're saying is every month you get a new wife and a new submissive. How's that for you?
Sounds exhausting. I don't want a new one. I just want to keep the one I like.
Kidding, kidding, kidding. I feel new. I feel different, like month after month.
And we say month after month because this really does happen in time with your menstrual cycle.
Absolutely.
And this is something even before I started tracking your cycle over 4 years ago now, something that realized, I really started to realize it once we were in our dominant submissive dynamic and I was trying to help. I was now in a position to try to help you grow, where I noticed that at that point, there was a window of a few days in the middle of each cycle where it felt like we made some progress.
Few days out of 30.
Literally. And then sometimes it felt like we went farther backwards
For 2 weeks.
for 4 weeks until we got back around to the next time when you were back closer to ovulation.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of what it was like to lead you back then.
I'm going to apologize again. I'm sorry.
But a part of that wasn't all you. A part of it was also the way that I handled and approached things. Because I had a lot of dismissal and dislike of the way that you were all of the times that you weren't ovulating. I didn't enjoy you for all of the person that you were. I enjoyed what felt like the way that you showed up for that period of a few days in the middle of your cycle.
Fun, Dawn.
Yeah.
I think it's your turn to apologize. I'm just kidding.
I'm sorry.
Totally kidding.
I'm not kidding. I am sorry for that. And I do owe you an apology for that, because what I learned when I started keeping track of your cycle which at the beginning was really to try to predict when you were going to have your period to help us plan life so we didn't have big events happening at a time when you felt cruddy.
Yeah.
But then I started keeping track of and learning more and more about you and how you naturally shifted and changed throughout every month. It's noticing and seeing patterns. It really did give me a new sense of compassion for the roller coaster ride that you go on every month, because what I eventually came to realize is your hormones are shifting every single day, and you are a different expression of yourself biologically today than you were yesterday, and tomorrow will be different than today. So paying attention to this and tracking it gave me a lot more compassion for you, and it allowed me to not just wait for those few days when you were a certain way, but to bring more acceptance and appreciation for who you are underneath all of that in a new way.
And I thank you for that, because it was an eye opener for me. Like, I'm a woman and I didn't understand this part of myself. I didn't hear this from the doctors, Western medicine, which I'm not saying there aren't those out there, but that was not my experience. You know, you heard about this in health class, maybe a little bit, but not to the degree that I understand myself now, which has allowed me to live in an acceptance instead of a rejection of myself.
How did having me start to track that cycle help you develop that acceptance of yourself?
Well, you would be the one to remind me like what day I was on, because I've never, I can't take, I say, I can't say never. I think at one point I tracked my cycle with an app, but over time I've learned a heck of a lot more about the shifts and the changes. Meanwhile, going through all this other personal growth, self-awareness work. And so you would tell me things like, you're on day 22. This is sometimes the day that you feel a little sassy. And I'm like, yep, woke up that way. Or you would remind me to give myself grace and compassion, because I wasn't living that way. I prided myself in self-discipline and basically like self-responsibility and plowing forward. I got shit done. I always worked hard, no matter what. And so that was a big eye opener for me. And it's been a journey of leaning into true self acceptance of where I'm at in so many different ways. Sometimes it feels easy, and sometimes I feel like I'm in disapproval of myself still once in a while, but it's gotten way easier overall, especially I would say the last couple days for me where I'm at. I have actually felt acceptance and compassion for myself in a way that it might sound weird, but it stands out when I haven't felt that before. But I only knew what I knew, including my own treatment of myself.
I want to give an example here of the kind of thing that keeping track of this has made it possible for me to see, and therefore possible for me to bring more acceptance to, and then in turn mirror that acceptance to you. And that is the fact that when I keep track of your cycle and I know every day what day you're on, and then over time I start to see you kind of have this recurring pattern of being really hard on yourself specifically around your view of your own body and your body image, right? And that's not a new thing.
Nope.
But what I've been able to see is that that mainly goes away now, except for a period of about 4 to 7 days when it comes right back up, flares right back up, and it's always been right at the same time of your cycle. Well, if we look at that time of your cycle, the luteal phase, right towards the end before your period starts, what's happening internally is you're going through a massive hormone crash. And when your hormones are crashing that hard, that fast, it's doing all kinds of things to you emotionally. And then, so in part, I was able to see that you get really hard on yourself around your body image in the last roughly 5 days before you get your period and the first day or two after. And then you feel much better about yourself again. And so it's allowed me to just bring compassion to the experience you're having, to try to mirror some compassion for you that you can maybe absorb somewhat for yourself. But two, it's also allowed me, because I've seen that pattern, I've also been able to see the ways that the patterns that you were most trying to break out of and let go of and move beyond have the highest tendency to reassert themselves right during that phase, that section of your cycle every month. And so I can see where you're at and what the patterns are that are flaring up in you, because you're the most susceptible to them when you are in the most emotionally vulnerable state. So it really does help me see what it is that you're most needing my leadership around too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a process of me recognizing those, because I see them then as I'm ready to let go of them. And I've had a lot of like the falling away in that deep luteal, because it represents fall, autumn. So for a while, there was almost this fear of going into that time of the month, because it was like, oh shit, what am I going to have to see and let go of now? But now I embrace it, because I can really focus on the new and who do I get to be now, because I am ready to see myself in a new way.
Another great example of not separating real life and the relationship from the dominant submissive dynamic, because it would be really easy to think you are being a bad submissive during that luteal phase more often than not, because the energy, the way that you're feeling internally is so different than it is a couple days before and a couple days after this little section of the month. If I didn't have compassion for you being where you are, then, and this is, by the way, how I used to act and react to this, was like, oh, what the fuck? Here we go again.
What's wrong with her?
Yeah. When I didn't know that and understand that this was a normal part of you being in the flow of being a woman, which, by the way, I like women and I want you to be one.
Thank you.
So I need to allow you to be and accept and encourage you to be a woman. And this is a part of what makes you a woman. So when I didn't realize that this was just a part of these big emotional swings were just a part of what's changing because your hormones are changing every single day, I would get super reactive and pissy or down on myself or withdraw from you because it was like you just were all of a sudden acting like you didn't give a fuck about me, the relationship, the dom sub dynamic. And then my old pattern would flare up, which is basically like just shut down, suppress everything, feel sorry for myself. And then you would come back around, hormones would change, and all of a sudden you'd be like, hi, I'm back. And any guy who is attentive to his woman knows that like you can like I can just feel the difference in you moment to moment. And all of a sudden I would look at you and you'd just be like you were back online. And you were wanting to be affectionate, you were more connected to your submission to me. And if I was butthurt over how you had or had not been over the last week or so, then I'd be all pissy with you about how you'd been acting, and I wouldn't be able to be present to appreciate that moment.
I'm surprised you use that word pissy because I would not describe you that way, but interesting.
Internally,
Yes, internally, I'm sure.
not externally with you.
No.
That was definitely something I stuffed.
I could feel it. You'd be a little distant. And it would take you a little bit to come back.
Yeah. And you'd be there like just as quickly coming out of this as you went into it. You'd be like, I'm feeling great today. And I'd still be stuck in the energy of how you had been.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was in resistance to it and disapproval of it.
Well, thank you for all of what you've done to lead us both in that.
Tracking your cycle and bringing acceptance to it has probably been no, not probably. Tracking your cycle has been the most beneficial and helpful part, both of me leading you well and of me being able to teach you about yourself more than anything else that I've done.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Because it's helped everything else fall in line.
Yeah, and it's helped us stay more connected throughout the month because I'm not resisting how you're showing up and you are also accepting yourself. So there's less of an inner battle going on with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
which makes you more able to be present with me too.
Right. Because, if you look at it this way, if I am in rejection of the very essence that makes me a woman, if I'm in rejection of my cycle, of how I change, like it's completely rejecting everything about me. So how could I then also proceed ahead on unwinding these other pieces of my emotional pain from my past? I can't. So I have to be able to accept where I'm at every day, no matter what.
And that really goes across the board. If we are in resistance to or rejection of the truth of ourself, then anything else that we do is just moving around deck chairs on the Titanic while it's sinking.
Yeah.
The last little topic I wanted to chat with you about today was I'm curious to know what you would say if you could go back and talk to yourself in that month between when I asked you to be my submissive and when you said yes. If you could go back and tell you what it's going to be like or to give you some information that you didn't have back then, what would you say to yourself?
Oh, wow. It is truly possible to love yourself. And accept yourself. So trust and follow. You'll get there. Internal peace and freedom can be yours. A life free from fear, filled with feeling alive, fun, passion, intensity, desire. And you will find God for real. Through going inside yourself.
What do you wish you would have known then that you know now?
I can't answer that because it feels like looking back and rejecting everything about life that brought me to where I am today. So it's really hard for me to be like, I wish I would have, because I didn't. Because I could sit here and probably talk for an hour on that, but it doesn't feel good to do. I can't go back and know anything more than I did at the time. So the more I've come into full acceptance of everything as it was, as good for me to lead me to more of me, it's also brought me more internal peace and freedom at the same time.
If I could go back and tell myself something, one of those things would definitely be to just let myself know that patience was going to be necessary. That even if you know what's right, you can't just have it. And even though I would have said that I understood that you can't force authenticity, I would have really reminded myself that even, not even a little bit, you can't even force authenticity a little bit.
Nope.
Not in myself and not in you. And not even if you said, I will do anything you want and I'll follow you anywhere. I still can't force it. And that's been a hard lesson to learn for me. Because I wouldn't have said that I was trying to force until you have shown me through your resistance that I was trying to take you somewhere that you weren't ready to go yet. And there's a constant balancing act inside of myself between, well, masterpiece and work in progress, both seeing myself that way and also seeing you that way.
Yeah.
Because even where we are today, I know that life can be even better. And I want that for you, for me, and for us.
Yeah.
And if I could make it happen right now, I would, because life is short and I want to enjoy every moment to the absolute fullest and to make the most out of this life that we possibly can. And that's where that balancing act between seeing this moment as absolutely perfect and everything that it is, and also seeing how it can be even better, and walking that line of leading without forcing and guiding without needing to be somewhere other than where we are.
Yeah, it's really like, you know, the best analogy in the moment that I'm coming up with is living like you are on a vacation every day, not living for the vacation that's coming next month. It's actually letting yourself enjoy every day, be in the moment, be present, because we all know every moment is fleeting and we don't know when our last day is.
Yeah. And that's that real, it is a very fine line as someone who's committed to taking you as close to heaven on earth as I can take you, when I can see what is even better ahead for us.
It's also living in heaven on earth every day, knowing that life will get better. You know, like I've had to come to my own acceptance of all of this and recognize that at certain times I can live in the possibility of what the future holds, but more often than not, at least right now for me, I just want to be here. Like I can't overthink about the future because it takes me out of the moments I'm in. And sometimes I've wondered, is there something wrong with me in that? I'm like, it doesn't matter because this is where I'm at. I don't know. Is there times more when that feels good? When it doesn't fucking matter. Right now, it doesn't feel good to me. And so there's,
Mm-hmm.
times where I've spoken up to you, like, I can't go there right now. I just want to be here. Let's fucking have fun.
Was that let's fucking have fun, or was that let's fuck and have fun?
Both,
Perfect.
all of it, all the time. And I do think that you've really led me to a life where we get to live that way. And I deeply appreciate it because, like, I'm living a life I didn't know was possible.
Yeah. And this is a challenge for me. And I know it's a challenge for a lot of other guys that I've worked with and that I have coached too, where as great as it is, when you can see that it can be even better. That's what I'm talking about with this line, this fine line that we have to walk between being in the moment, but also still leading towards that future, that next evolution. And it's not an easy thing sometimes for, as men, the way that we're built, the way that we're made. And a part of what makes me really good at what I do in our business, makes me really good at being your leader and your sir, is my ability to see down the road and to know where to go. And this is something I think men are inherently good at, naturally built that way. So it's not a dismissal or disapproval of the moment to want to continue to grow and evolve into the next thing. It's both, it's masterpiece and work of art. But it is, from our perspective as the man, as the masculine, as the dominant, it's it's a constant balancing act and finding the right balance between the present and the future, the enjoying and the growing.
Absolutely. For both of us.
Is there any last little thing that you would like to share? Little tidbits, pieces of wisdom?
The only word that's coming up for me is trust. Trust that life always works out for you. Learn to trust in yourself, that you will continue to evolve and grow and become more of yourself, because all you have to do is have the desire to. There's no going out and doing like a lot of life has taught us to do. Learn how to trust your partner, that they will grow and they will evolve. And, depending on what side you are of the slash, when you can grow in love and devotion and trust of each other, it can only get better. Don't give up, but be patient and enjoy every day.
One last thing here. I want to hear from you if you have any honest, as brutally honest as you want to be, reflections to me about how I could be a better dominant for you.
We already kind of talked about this one, is that the surrender for you is not getting to control my letting go, my timeline, my ability to see things for myself. Because I can hear from you, like, I want you to love yourself like I love you. I want you to think you're as beautiful as I do. You could tell me you're living in codependent patterns here, but I am my own soul having this human experience. I am my own soul that needs to find my connection to Source, to God. And that has to come from inside of myself. And that's what you don't get to control, no matter how much you want to. So I need you to trust me that I am committed to being all of myself for me and for you and for us together.
And I do. Sometimes I just want to help it along a little bit.
And frankly, I wish you could. There have been times where I look at you, I'm like, just do something. But I can look back now and realize how I was just throwing my hands in the air and dismissing my own life experience. Back to that self-abandonment. It was acting like I didn't matter and I didn't know anything. And eventually I got to the point where it's like, oh, wait, you do matter. You are worthy. And now I get to step forward in that and bring that goodness to you, which is it's my work in progress.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I'm always open for constructive criticism.
I know you are. And I love that about both of us, because there was a time where I know I couldn't receive that because of my own pain I was carrying. And because of this dynamic, I'm not carrying that anymore. So thank you. I love you.